Welcome back, folks. My name is LastKnownMeal. So today we're gonna be talking about The Witcher 2 because yesterday on the CDPR 20th anniversary edition they talked about The Witcher 2 and everything which was happening in that game, and as soon as that was done and I was done with my stream, I just turned it off. I installed the game and played it until the morning because honestly it's been a while since I played The Witcher 2. It's been a year almost, and there's a few things which definitely surprised me and which still stand even in 2022, and that's why I'm telling you, you just have to play this game, because I've heard that there is a lot of people who have played The Witcher 3 but they've never played The Witcher 2 or 1. Now keep in mind, I do understand why people don't want to go into The Witcher 1. It's a little bit of a problematic game from the mechanical standpoint when it comes to combat. It's clicky, so you have to click the button at the right time and Geralt is going to deal damage. But on the story perspective and the atmosphere perspective, I still think that The Witcher 1 is a great title. Now in The Witcher 2, CDPR did something else. First off, they went with Red Engine, which was their in-house engine which was created for The Witcher 2, because keep in mind, for The Witcher 1 they used Aurora engine from BioWare, which they actually did change a lot to fit the game. So like what did they say, 90% of that engine when they were done was basically their own code which they had to put in so they can actually make The Witcher 1 in the first place. But of course Witcher 2 had one of the biggest, I think, upticks when it comes to quality and graphics from like its predecessor, which was insane, because when you compare Witcher 1 and Witcher 2, for example, Witcher 2 still stands to this day as a game which looks phenomenal, and it's actually going to sweat your PC even today. Keep in mind, I'm running this on 3070 Ti, and when you put Uber sampling on, which basically makes everything go to a different level when it comes to quality, the FPS is definitely going to stutter. Now we can obviously pin that to Red Engine itself because, at the same time, I mean, I'm running this on 3070 Ti, I shouldn't be running like this, but at the same time, when you do compare the quality of the game itself and how the graphics look, and even if I lose a couple of frames, I'm not going to mind it, because some of the things which CDPR played with here is definitely the level design and how they light the scene. So when you go throughout, like for example, the forest itself, I really love this location because you felt like you were in this dense forest below any trees whatsoever, and you just felt like you were in a jungle, scenario, which is something that I think Witcher 1 and Witcher 3 really don't have in that sense, which was present in The Witcher 2. But also, when you look at the lights in the scene, when you look at the sun rays, when you look at the shading, it was done really well, that even to this day, this shading and everything looks like it was made like a few years ago. And now if we're gonna be talking about The Witcher 2 generally, it's a lot more grand than The Witcher 1, and in some areas I think even more than The Witcher 3, but The Witcher 3 is a huge game, so we cannot really compare it that well. But in The Witcher 1 it was more of a personal story, meanwhile in The Witcher 2 you had dragons, you had various monsters, big boss fights, which honestly is something that we didn't have later on so much, but at the same time there was a lot more grandiosity in that, because now Geralt was involved in the politics of kings and queens, especially because he gets accused of murdering a king and now he has to clear his name. All of those things come into like a big entanglement issue which now Geralt has to solve, and on that sense it's definitely it captures the world itself and the universe. It captures a lot of characters which are really unique for that period and which tell the story of the universe really well, because you do visit various locations, you do go to Mahakam, you go talk with devs and see how they handle all of that and how they live in their town. So I think this variety that The Witcher 2 had is one of the biggest pluses that the game actually had. And also at the same time you had various choices, even changing the entire game, where you actually had to play the game again to go through a certain storyline, which I don't want to spoil, to actually see the different perspective of that story, which I think is nice. I think this game, when it comes to choices and consequences, has a lot of them, even in some cases more than The Witcher 3. At the same time, as I said, it's a lot more difficult than The Witcher 3 for me. Like playing The Witcher 3 on Deathmatch and playing this on the hardest difficulty is night and day difference. I mean, some of those things can be contributed maybe to the combat being good, but at the same time not being as fluid as in The Witcher 3, but at the same time, some of the punches and the sounds and generally how Geralt fought in The Witcher 2 for me personally was somewhat more enjoyable than The Witcher 3, but at the same time, the mobility of the animation and the quality of animation that there is in The Witcher 3 cannot be compared to The Witcher 2, and that's maybe some of the difficulty comes into place because you're going to do something and it's like the character is not going to do the right movement, you're going to get stuck and so on. I also like how much The Witcher 2 delves into different characters, especially going into Triss and Zoltan, and this whole relationship that Geralt actually has with Triss in The Witcher 2 is great, and is definitely something which was overshadowed a lot with Yennefer obviously in The Witcher 3, but it made more sense because then the story kinda rounds up in The Witcher 3 generally, where you go find Ciri and all of that. Meanwhile, The Witcher 2 is going to be the story about, well, first off, as I said, the Kingslayers, and at the same time you also have to realize that this is a story of a fight between Scoia'tael and humans, or the fight between humans and non-humans, which kind of started in The Witcher 1. You saw a lot more of that, but in The Witcher 2 it really culminated and it gave you the story of these two perspectives, of these two factions fighting for their own goals, which in their, basis have maybe good intentions, but the way they realize and the way this fighting goes on becomes more worse and worse and worse. And there's also something which Sapkowski was handling and tackling in his books, where this fight between humans and non-humans is simply useless, and at the end of the day doesn't bring or achieve anything good, rather than just pain and misery on both sides. And it was really well done also in The Witcher 1, where you had that part of the story which I'm not going to spoil, but it also, as I said, shines a lot in The Witcher 2. At the same time, when it comes to the presentation itself, when it comes to the music, I mean, it still retains what The Witcher music is all about, and it fills the scene, it fills the atmosphere, and it really helps a lot. And now when you combine it with these locations and this level design and this quality that even to this day works, it's just a recipe for success. And that's why I urge you, if you never played The Witcher 2, I definitely suggest you do it, because this is one of those games which is going to kind of tell you a bigger perspective of Geralt and that story if you've never really read the books or you only played The Witcher 3. Also, The Witcher 2 had two things which are really nice. It also had the arena mini game which you can play, and you can just fight different enemies, and every time you finish a fight you're gonna be able to choose a weapon or get money. Then you're gonna be able to hire people which are gonna be helping you in a fight itself. So that's also a mini game you can test out. I think that's great because it's going to tell you how to fight in this game, because fighting here is a little bit more complicated and sometimes tedious than, as I said, in The Witcher 3. And also they had Red Kit released for The Witcher 2, which allowed modders and people to create whole new adventures in this, and that's one of the biggest minuses The Witcher 3 had, and that's why it doesn't have huge mods, just because you don't really have the right tools to do it. Yes, you do have Wolven Kit and fan-made tools and all of that, but at the same time, having something made by the developers, and released as a proper tool, it's gonna help people a lot who are just now getting into modding, and it's gonna give the ability to people who know how to mod already proper tools so they can work with it. That's why you have Nightmare of the White Wolf, which is a standalone mod for The Witcher 2. You can download it and play it. You just need to have The Witcher 2 copy of the game itself in order to be able to run it. But at the same time, that's one of the biggest minuses, because The Witcher 3, with its popularity and everything it had achieved, it could have had insane modding community. It had, there is a lot of mods right now for The Witcher, but most of them are quality of life changes and not rather new quests and adventures and big changes which cannot be easily achieved if you don't have the Red Kit. And also for the end, I mean, voice acting in this game is really well done. It's a lot better than in The Witcher 1, because it had its problems in The Witcher 1 where, the quality wasn't the best, but at the same time, they tightened that up in The Witcher 2, so the voice acting, the scenes and everything are going to be extremely nice and extremely well done on that sense. I mean, there is no denying that. And also, if we're gonna be talking about level design and also how the game is done, I mean, obviously it still maintains the same design as The Witcher 1, where you're gonna be going through different zones. Those zones are going to be separated through like different loading screens, whatever, and it's understandable why they went with open world in The Witcher 3, just because it made everything bigger and more grandiose, because you can definitely see in The Witcher 2 in some areas that it's a little bit too linear, where you cannot jump and where you cannot go through some areas. It can be frustrating for some, but at the same time, because the levels are so well detailed and because you have levels which are going to be more open in that sense, it's still nice and I don't have a problem with it overall. So yeah, The Witcher 2 came out in 2011. I played it. I'm gonna continue playing it after this video. I definitely recommend you do it. Check it out, see how it goes, but if you just played The Witcher 3 and you never played anything else, this is going to be an insane adventure, and you know, you're gonna be going through various different twists and turns, and your dialogue is going to be very important and what you say and which story you're gonna be actually following. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll try to upload tomorrow. I'm not sure if that's gonna be happening because I have some private things to take care of, but we'll talk about it, we'll see. Again, don't forget to tell me down below what do you think about it, and if you enjoyed this video, smash that like and subscribe button for more. Also check us out on Twitter and Discord, and huge thanks to my current Patreon supporters. This is LKM signing out, stay classy everyone, and bye bye.